Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm so glad you're here today. My name is Alex, and this is English in Fluency, the channel where we take real, spoken English apart piece by piece, look at how it actually works, and put it back together in a way that makes sense for your life. Not textbook English, not grammar test English, real English. The kind people actually use when they're talking to each other, thinking out loud, working through problems, or trying to say something without quite saying it directly. And today, oh, today is a good one. Because today, we are going to talk about something that I think is one of the most underrated listening skills in the entire English language. We're going to talk about uncertainty. We're going to talk about how English speakers, native speakers, fluent speakers, everyday people, signal doubt, hesitation, and possibility in their speech. And we're going to train your ear to catch those signals, even when they're subtle, even when they're quick, even when they're hidden inside otherwise normal-sounding sentences. Here's why this matters so much. Have you ever been in a conversation in English, or listening to one, and someone said something that sounded confident, but something in your gut told you they weren't sure? Like the words were saying yes, but the voice was saying maybe? Or you asked someone for advice, and they gave you a long, thoughtful answer, and by the end of it, you still weren't sure whether they actually believed what they were saying? That feeling, that gap between what was said and what was meant, that almost always comes from uncertainty signals, from small linguistic markers that native speakers use all the time to soften certainty, to express doubt, to open up space for possibility. And once you know how to hear them, everything changes. So let's do this. I want to introduce you to the people we're going to spend time with today, and then we're going to work through their conversations together, and I'm going to point out, in real time, with real examples, exactly what the signals of uncertainty sound like, how they work, and how you can practice catching them yourself. Our main character today is a young man named Oliver. Oliver is 28 years old. He's been learning English for about 5 years. He works at a mid-sized architecture firm, and he's gotten pretty good at English in professional contexts. Emails, presentations, structured conversations. But when things get messy, when people are talking around a problem, or thinking out loud, or avoiding being direct, Oliver often misses what's really happening. He hears the surface. He misses the underneath. His closest friend at work is a woman named Priya. Priya is 31, sharp, funny, and incredibly perceptive. She grew up speaking both English and her family's first language, and she navigates conversations in English with a kind of natural ease that Oliver genuinely admires. Priya often helps Oliver understand the social and emotional layers of workplace conversations that go over his head. She's patient, but she's also direct. She tells him the truth. Oliver also has a manager named Tom. Tom is in his mid-40s, experienced, and, this is important, he is one of those people who almost never says directly what he means when the topic is difficult or uncertain. He wraps things. He softens things. He uses hedge words and gentle phrases and careful constructions that technically say one thing while actually meaning another. Oliver has spent nearly a year trying to decode Tom, with mixed success. But today is the day things start to click. And finally, there's a character who comes in later in our story. Her name is Nina. Nina is a client, a businesswoman who hired Oliver's firm to work on a renovation project. Nina is decisive, generally direct, but like most people, she becomes much less direct when she's uncertain. And there is one particular conversation between Nina and Oliver that we're going to examine very closely, because it is almost a masterclass in uncertainty signals. Okay, let's begin at the beginning. It's a Tuesday morning. Oliver arrives at work and finds an email from Tom waiting for him. The email is short. It says, "Hey Oliver, can we connect today? I want to chat about the Henderson project. Maybe around 2? Let me know if that works." Oliver reads this and immediately starts worrying. He turns to Priya, who sits at the desk next to him, and shows her the email. He says, "Is this bad? Why does he want to meet about Henderson? We just submitted everything last week." Priya reads the email. She tilts her head a little. Then she says, "I'm not sure. It might be nothing." Oliver looks at her. "Might be." And Priya says, "I mean, probably it's just a check-in." But the word chat, Tom doesn't usually say chat when things are fine. He says quick update or sync. Chat is a little more. She pauses. Open-ended. Now, let's stop right here. Because what Priya just did is incredibly important. She identified 2 uncertainty signals in Tom's email that Oliver had completely missed. The first one is the word might. When Priya said it might be nothing, she was using might and not is or will be, specifically because she's not sure. She's offering a possibility, not a fact. Might is a modal verb, and modal verbs like might, could, may, and would are some of the most important uncertainty signals in English. They tell you the speaker is not fully certain. They're working with probability, not fact. The second thing Priya noticed was Tom's word choice in the email, specifically the word chat. And this is a slightly different kind of uncertainty signal. It's not a signal that Tom is uncertain. It's a signal that Tom is being deliberately vague. Chat is a soft, casual word. It implies an informal, low-stakes conversation. But Priya, who knows Tom well, understands that Tom uses this casual language precisely when the conversation is going to be a little uncomfortable. He softens the word to soften your expectations. It's a kindness, in a way, but it also means prepare yourself. This isn't just a quick check-in. Oliver sits with this for a moment. Then he says, "So you think something is wrong?" And Priya says, "I don't know. I just think it's worth going in ready for anything. It could be totally fine. It's just the word chat makes me want to be a little more prepared." And there it is again. I don't know. It could be. 2 more uncertainty signals, right in a row. Priya is a clear, honest communicator, and part of that clarity is her willingness to say when she's not sure. She doesn't pretend to know things she doesn't know. She uses language that accurately reflects the actual level of her certainty. And that honesty about uncertainty, is something that a lot of learners find confusing, because they expect confident speakers to always sound confident. But actually, the most confident communicators are often the most comfortable saying, "I'm not sure," because pretending to be certain when you're not is a form of dishonesty. Real confidence includes the confidence to say, "I don't have all the answers here." Let's think about this for a second in terms of your own English listening. When you hear someone say, "I don't know," or "I'm not sure," or "it might be," do you sometimes interpret that as a lack of information? Like the person literally has nothing to offer? That's a common misreading. Very often, "I'm not sure" is followed by the person's best analysis of the situation. It's not a wall, it's a doorway. "I'm not sure, but" is one of the most useful phrases in English conversation, because what comes after the "but" is usually a thoughtful, honest perspective, one that the person is giving you while being upfront about its limitations. That's valuable. That's trustworthy. So the first big thing to take away today is this. When you hear uncertainty language, modal verbs like might, could, may, would, phrases like "I'm not sure," "I don't know," "it seems like," "it feels like," "I think," "I believe," these are not failures of communication. They are honest signals about the speaker's level of certainty, and they are incredibly useful for a listener who knows how to hear them. Now let's move to 2 o'clock. Oliver goes into his meeting with Tom. Tom's office is comfortable, a little messy with blueprints and folders, and Tom is sitting with his hands around a coffee mug when Oliver comes in. Tom smiles. He says, "Hey, thanks for coming by. Sit down." Oliver sits. Tom looks at his screen for a second, then back at Oliver. He says, "So, I wanted to touch base about Henderson. I think we're in pretty good shape overall. I do. But I wonder if there might be a few things worth revisiting before we get to the next phase." Okay, full stop. Let's break this down together, because Tom just packed an enormous amount of uncertainty into what sounds like a polite, professional, mostly positive statement. Let's go through it slowly. I think we're in pretty good shape overall. Tom didn't say, "We're in good shape." He said, "I think." That's the first signal. "I think" means this is my opinion, my assessment, my current read of the situation, but it's not a statement of established fact. When someone says, "I think," before a positive statement, they're usually also softening it, preparing you for something that complicates it. Pretty good shape. Not great shape. Not excellent shape. Pretty good. Pretty, in this context, is what linguists sometimes call a hedge word. It softens the adjective that follows it. Pretty good is less good than good. It's in the general vicinity of good, but with a little bit of distance from fully good. And Oliver might hear "pretty good" and feel reassured, but a more experienced listener hears "pretty good" and thinks, "Okay, but not great. Something is being held back here." I do. Tom added "I do" right after "overall." That little affirmation, "I do," is actually a classic signal that something is coming that might contradict it. It's like he's preemptively defending the positive statement because he knows it's about to be complicated. It's the spoken version of "don't get me wrong." He's saying, "I genuinely believe this. But I wonder if there might be a few things worth revisiting." Okay, there's almost a whole lesson packed into this single phrase. "I wonder if" is a very soft, very polite way of suggesting something without asserting it. Tom is not saying there are things that need to be fixed. He's saying he wonders. He's thinking out loud. He's framing it as a question in his own mind, rather than as a direct statement. This is a classic technique for delivering potentially negative feedback in a way that feels collaborative rather than critical. "I wonder if" invites the other person in. It says, "Help me think about this." It doesn't say, "You did something wrong," and then "might be," not "are," "might be." Again, the modal verb doing its work. And a few things, not many things, not major things, just a few, and not problems. Things worth revisiting. That phrase is beautiful in its gentleness. Worth revisiting means these things are valuable enough to look at again, together, calmly. It's not urgent. It's not alarming. It's a quiet, respectful nudge. So what is Tom actually saying underneath all this careful language? He's saying, there are problems with the Henderson project that need to be addressed before we move forward. But he's saying it in the softest, most collaborative way possible, and he's layering uncertainty language throughout to keep the conversation from feeling like a confrontation. Oliver hears the politeness, he hears the positive framing, and he feels mostly okay, a little uncertain himself. He says, "Sure, what kind of things?" And Tom says, "Well, I was looking at the timeline, and I'm not entirely sure the Phase 2 schedule is realistic. It seems like there might be some overlap with the Greystone project that we haven't quite accounted for. I could be wrong. I haven't done a full comparison. But it feels a little tight to me." Now Tom has given Oliver a full sentence packed with uncertainty signals, and I want you to really hear each one. I'm not entirely sure, not I'm not sure, but not entirely sure, which means he has some confidence, but not full confidence. It seems like, seems, not is. Seeming is a perception, an impression, not a verified fact. Might be some overlap. Might be, not is. We haven't quite accounted for, quite is another hedge word, softening the accusation, making it less direct. I could be wrong. Tom is acknowledging his own fallibility here, openly, which both makes Oliver feel less defensive and also signals genuine uncertainty. And finally, it feels a little tight to me. Feels, not is. And a little tight, not impossible or disastrous. Tom is managing Oliver's emotional experience throughout this conversation as carefully as he's managing the information itself. And he's doing it through uncertainty language. Every hedge, every might, every seems like, every I could be wrong. These are not just fillers. They're tools. Tools that say, I'm not attacking you. I'm not certain myself. Let's look at this together. Oliver leaves the meeting. He finds Priya. He says, "Okay, so Tom thinks there might be some scheduling issues." Priya raises an eyebrow. "Might be?" Oliver nods. "Yeah, he wasn't sure. He said he could be wrong." Priya says, When Tom says he could be wrong, he usually isn't." Oliver stares at her. "So there's a real problem?" Priya tilts her head. "Possibly. But it's also possible he just wants you to look into it before it becomes one. I'd take it seriously, but I wouldn't panic." Look at what Priya is doing here. She's giving Oliver real, useful guidance, but she's being honest about the limits of her own knowledge. Usually isn't. Not always. Possibly. It's also possible. I'd take it seriously, but I wouldn't panic. Every single one of these is calibrated. She's not telling Oliver what to feel. She's giving him a range of possibilities and the information he needs to decide for himself. This is something really valuable to understand about how good communicators use uncertainty language. They don't use it as an excuse to be vague or unhelpful. They use it to give you accurate information, including accurate information about how confident they are. The level of certainty is itself part of the message. When Priya says possibly, she's telling Oliver, don't ignore this, but don't lose sleep over it either. The word possibly is doing real work. It's calibrating his response. Let's talk about some of the most common uncertainty signals in English and what they each mean in terms of the speaker's level of confidence. Because not all uncertainty is the same. There's a spectrum, and knowing where a word falls on that spectrum helps you understand exactly how much weight to give something. At the lower end of the certainty spectrum, meaning the speaker is genuinely quite unsure, you'll hear things like, "I have no idea," "I really don't know," "It's hard to say," "Your guess is as good as mine," or "I couldn't say for sure." These phrases are telling you the speaker has very little to go on. They might be guessing. They might have a vague feeling, but nothing stronger. A step up from that, a little more confident, but still in doubt territory, you'll hear, "I'm not sure, but I think maybe. It might be. It could be. Possibly. Perhaps. I have a feeling that." These signal that the speaker has some information or intuition, but they're not ready to commit to it as fact. They're offering a working theory. Moving further up the spectrum, toward cautious confidence, you get phrases like, "I think," "I believe," "It seems like," "It looks like," "As far as I know," "From what I can tell," "I would guess," "Probably," "Most likely." These signal that the speaker has a real opinion or assessment. They're not just guessing, but they're being honest that they could still be wrong. And then, at the high end of confidence, just below full certainty, you get, "I'm fairly sure," "I'm pretty confident," "I'm almost certain," "I'd be surprised if it weren't," "I would expect." These mean the speaker has strong evidence or experience backing their position, but they're leaving just a small crack open for the possibility of being wrong. This whole spectrum matters enormously when you're listening, because the difference between "I think you should call him" and "you should definitely call him" is huge. The first is an opinion being offered carefully. The second is a recommendation being given with confidence. And if you hear them both as the same kind of statement, you might misunderstand the speaker's actual level of certainty about what they're suggesting. Let's bring Oliver back, because later that afternoon he has a phone call with Nina, the client. And this call is a perfect demonstration of how uncertainty signals work in a more commercial, more high-stakes context. Nina calls to ask about the timeline for her renovation project. She's been patient. She's a reasonable person. But she needs to know when things will actually start moving. Oliver answers the call and Nina says, "Hi, Oliver. So I just wanted to check in on the schedule. Do we still have a start date of the 15th? Her voice is calm, professional. But there's something in the question. "Do we still have?" That already hints at doubt. She said, "Still," which implies she knows the situation might have changed, and she's checking to find out. Oliver doesn't have the full picture yet because of the Tom conversation earlier, but he knows enough to know that the timeline might be tighter than planned. He says, "Hi, Nina. And I want to be upfront with you about this. We're currently reviewing the schedule for Phase 2, and I think we're on track, but I want to double-check a few things before I confirm the 15th. He pauses. "Is there any flexibility on your end if we needed a small adjustment?" Nina is quiet for a second. Then she says, "Well, I'd need to know how small we're talking. I have contractors scheduled based on your timeline, so it's not ideal if things shift. But I suppose if it was a matter of days rather than weeks, that might be manageable." Let's break Nina's response down, because it's a beautiful piece of uncertainty communication. First, "I'd need to know how small we're talking." This is a conditional statement. I'd need. using the conditional would to signal that her answer depends on information she doesn't yet have. She's not saying yes. She has flexibility. She's not saying no. She's keeping herself open while making it clear that her answer isn't unconditional. It's not ideal if things shift. Not ideal is a very classic British-influenced understatement in English. It doesn't mean it's fine. It means it would be a problem. But she's saying it gently, not ideal, because she doesn't want to be confrontational. She's flagging a concern while keeping the conversation professional and warm. And then, but I suppose if it was a matter of days rather than weeks, that might be manageable. Look at all the uncertainty packed into that one short sentence. I suppose, not I know, not I agree. I suppose, which means I'm willing to consider this with reservations. If it was a matter of days rather than weeks, a conditional. Her willingness to be flexible depends entirely on the scale of the delay, and might be manageable, not would be fine, not that's no problem. Might be manageable. It's possible. It could work. But she's not committing to anything. What Nina is telling Oliver in this careful, polite, hedge-filled response is, I'm not happy about the possibility of a delay. I have constraints. If the delay is small, I can probably work with it. But I'm not going to promise that until I know more. And I need you to come back to me with specifics. Oliver hears this because he's been paying attention today, because Priya helped him tune in, and he says, absolutely. I'll get you a definitive answer by end of day tomorrow. I appreciate your patience. And Nina says, of course, just keep me in the loop. And that final phrase, keep me in the loop, is its own kind of signal. It means, I don't fully trust that I'll be informed unless I ask you to inform me. It's gentle, but it's a request born of mild concern. After the call, Oliver sits for a moment and just thinks. He thinks about how different that conversation felt from how he would have processed it 6 months ago. 6 months ago, he might have heard Nina say, that might be manageable, and thought, great, she's fine with the delay. But today, he heard the might. He heard the I suppose. He heard the conditional structure. And he understood that Nina is not fine with a delay. She's willing to be flexible if necessary, and only if it's small. Those are two very different things. This is the shift we're working toward in your listening, and I want to name it clearly. When you start hearing uncertainty signals, really hearing them, not just processing the words around them, you start to understand not just what people say, but what they're actually working with, their doubts, their hopes, their concerns, their limits. And when you understand those things, you can respond to them. You can address the real conversation, not just the surface one. Let's take a little detour and talk about something called hedging, because it's a word that comes up a lot in linguistics and language learning, and I think it deserves a clear, simple explanation in plain English. Hedging is the technical term for all the things we've been talking about. It's when a speaker uses language to soften or limit the strength of their statement, to leave room for doubt, to signal that they might not have the complete picture. Hedging is not lying. It's not being evasive, at least not usually. In most cases, hedging is actually the most honest thing a speaker can do because it accurately represents their actual level of certainty. When Tom says, I wonder if there might be a few things worth revisiting, he's hedging. He's being polite, yes, but he's also being honest. He's not absolutely certain there's a problem. He has a concern, and he's inviting Oliver to look at it with him. That's responsible, thoughtful communication. Hedging becomes a problem only when it's used to deliberately mislead. When someone is almost certain something is wrong, but hedges so much that the other person thinks it might be nothing. That's a misuse of hedging. But in everyday conversation, professional settings, and authentic human interaction, hedging is almost always a sign that the speaker is taking their responsibility to communicate accurately very seriously. Understanding this changes the way you receive uncertainty language. Instead of feeling frustrated when someone doesn't just say it directly, you can appreciate that they're doing you the courtesy of sharing their real, honest, uncertain thinking. They're not keeping you in the dark. They're letting you inside their head, including the messy, unresolved parts of their head. That's actually a gift. Let's keep going with Oliver, because there's another scene I want to show you. This one is more casual, and it shows uncertainty signals in a social context, not a professional one. Because uncertainty doesn't only live at work, it lives everywhere. In friendships, in family conversations, in coffee shops, in text messages, anywhere people are human and honest and still figuring things out. Oliver and Priya are having lunch together, sitting outside, and Priya says, "Hey, can I ask you something a little personal?" Oliver says, "Sure." Priya says, "Do you think you want to stay at this firm long term? Like, is this where you see yourself in 5 years?" Oliver is quiet for a second. Then he says, "Honestly, I'm not sure. I like the work. I think I like the people. Most of them. But I don't know if I'm excited about where the company is going." Priya nods slowly. "Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. There's something about the direction lately that I'm not entirely comfortable with. I can't quite put my finger on it." Oliver says, "Do you think you'd leave?" And Priya says, "Maybe. I don't know. I've been thinking about it, but I haven't decided anything. It's more like a feeling I keep having rather than a plan." Now, let's listen to this conversation not as a dramatic workplace story, but as a study in uncertainty language. Because this is exactly the kind of conversation where uncertainty language does its most important emotional work. Oliver said, "I'm not sure." He said, "I think I like the people." He said, "I don't know if I'm excited." These 3 phrases, "I'm not sure," "I think," and "I don't know if," map out exactly where his head is. He has some things he's clear on. He likes the work. He's unclear on others. His feelings about the company's direction, his long-term plans. The uncertainty language tells Priya, and tells us, exactly which parts of his thinking are settled and which parts are still in motion. Priya mirrors this back with her own honest uncertainty. "I kind of feel the same way." Kind of. Not completely. Not wholly, just kind of. There's something about the direction that I'm not entirely comfortable with. Not entirely. She has some discomfort, but she's not fully sure what it is. I can't quite put my finger on it. This is a wonderful English idiom for uncertainty. I can't quite put my finger on it means I sense something, but I can't define it precisely. And then, when Oliver asks if she'd leave, "Maybe. I don't know. I've been thinking about it, but I haven't decided anything. It's more like a feeling I keep having rather than a plan." That final sentence is so honest and so human. A feeling I keep having rather than a plan. She's not presenting confusion as a decision. She's presenting it as exactly what it is, an ongoing emotional experience that hasn't yet become a commitment. And the language she uses, rather than more like, keep having, all of it creates an accurate picture of where she actually is in her own thinking. This kind of honest, careful, uncertainty-acknowledging communication is something to listen for and to admire, because it takes a certain kind of social confidence to say, I don't know, and I haven't decided, and I have a feeling but I can't explain it, in a culture that often rewards the appearance of certainty. The people who can sit comfortably with expressed uncertainty, who can say, I'm still figuring this out, without embarrassment, are often the most trustworthy people in the room. Because you know that when they do say something with confidence, they mean it. Let's talk now about a specific kind of uncertainty that's a little different from what we've been discussing, and that's the uncertainty that comes from possibility rather than doubt. Because not all uncertainty is about worrying that something might go wrong. Sometimes uncertainty is about hoping that something might go right. And this kind of positive uncertainty has its own vocabulary, and it's worth knowing. When someone is genuinely open about a positive possibility, you'll hear phrases like, there's a chance that, it's possible that, who knows, maybe, I wouldn't rule it out, it could happen, or I'd like to think so. These have a different emotional texture from the doubt-based uncertainty we've been looking at. They're lighter, more open, and often they carry a kind of hope or excitement that the more cautious uncertainty language doesn't have. Let me give you an example. Oliver has been quietly working on a personal project. Some architectural designs he's been developing on his own time, more creative than what the firm usually works on. He mentions them to Priya one afternoon. She says, "Oh, wow. Have you thought about maybe submitting these somewhere? Like a competition or a journal?" Oliver looks a little embarrassed, a little hopeful. He says, "I've thought about it. I don't know if they're good enough." Priya says, "I think they could be. And who knows? Maybe something comes of it." Who knows? Maybe something comes of it. That's positive uncertainty. She doesn't know. She can't promise. But the phrase, who knows, is an invitation to possibility. It's not a guarantee. It's a door being left open. And the word maybe here isn't about doubt. It's about hope. It's Priya saying, I believe in this enough to encourage you, and I'm honest enough not to promise an outcome I can't deliver. Oliver hears this, and what he hears is not vagueness. What he hears is genuine, honest encouragement from someone who believes in him but respects reality. That combination, encouragement plus honesty, is what makes who knows, maybe something comes of it, more meaningful than I'm sure you'll win. Because he knows Priya isn't just saying it to make him feel good. She's saying it because she believes it's possible. And possibility, honestly expressed, is often more motivating than false certainty. There's one more scene I want to walk you through before we move into our practice section, and it's one of my favorites. It happens a few days later, and it involves all four characters: Oliver, Priya, Tom, and Nina. The Henderson Project timeline has been reviewed, and there is, as Tom suspected, a scheduling conflict. Oliver has worked through it, found a solution, and now he needs to communicate the updated timeline to Nina while also presenting it to Tom for approval. He drafts the email to Nina first, and he shows it to Priya. She reads it and says, It's good, but I notice you wrote, "We're confident the new timeline will work." Are you confident? Oliver pauses. He thinks. Mostly. I think there's maybe a 10% chance something else could shift. Priya says, then I wouldn't say confident. I'd say something like, we believe the revised timeline addresses the conflict, and barring any unforeseen changes, we're on track to begin on the 22nd. Oliver looks at the suggestion. Isn't that weaker? Priya shakes her head. It's more honest, and honest is actually stronger. If you say, we're confident, and then something shifts again, you lose trust. If you say, barring unforeseen changes, and something shifts again, you already told her it could happen. You're protected. And more importantly, she's prepared. This is a wisdom moment, and I want to make sure we sit with it. Priya is explaining something fundamental about uncertainty language. It's not weakness. In professional and personal communication, expressing calibrated uncertainty is a form of integrity. It's telling the other person, I'm not going to promise you something I can't fully control. I believe this is right. I think this will work. But I'm being honest about the fact that I'm working with incomplete information, like all of us always are. That honesty builds trust. It doesn't undermine it. Oliver rewrites the email. He sends it. He uses Priya's language. Barring any unforeseen changes, we're on track. Nina writes back, thank you for the clear update. Looking forward to moving ahead. And in that response, that warm, direct, no uncertainty response from Nina is a signal too. When someone who has been hedging and carefully qualifying throughout a difficult conversation suddenly becomes clear and direct, it's a sign that their uncertainty has been resolved, that their questions have been answered, that they feel safe moving forward. Reading the shift from uncertain language to certain language is just as important as hearing the uncertainty in the first place. When someone goes from, I suppose it might be manageable, to looking forward to moving ahead, that shift is the payoff. That's the moment when the communication worked, when the honesty and the care and the calibrated language all came together and gave the other person what they needed to feel sure. And now I want to give you your practice section. Because everything we've talked about today, all these signals, all these patterns, all these examples, they only become useful if you practice applying them. Real listening skills come from doing the thing, not just understanding the thing. So here are several ways to practice what you've learned today, using any English audio you have access to. The first practice is what I call certainty spotting. As you listen to any English audio, a podcast, a TV show, a YouTube video, a movie, listen specifically for the words and phrases that signal uncertainty. Every time you hear one, might, I think, seems like, probably, I'm not sure, it could be, I wonder if, note it, just in your head, or on a piece of paper if you prefer. And ask yourself, how certain is this speaker? Are they very uncertain, somewhat uncertain, or just a little uncertain? Try to place them on the spectrum we talked about. This builds your sensitivity to the language of uncertainty really quickly, because once you start looking for it, you realize it's everywhere. The second practice is what I call hedge versus no hedge. Take a sentence you hear and mentally replace all the hedge words with certain language. So instead of, I think it might be a good idea, imagine someone saying, it is a good idea. Feel the difference. Notice how the certain version feels more definitive, but also more risky. Because if it turns out not to be a good idea, the speaker has no cushion. The hedge version is honest. The speaker thinks it might work, but they're not certain. Doing this exercise helps you understand why people choose to hedge, and it deepens your appreciation of what the hedge words are actually communicating. The third practice involves conversations you observe in your daily life, in English, or even in your own language. Listen for when people shift from uncertain language to certain language, the way Nina shifted from hedging to clarity at the end of her conversation with Oliver. When does someone's language change? What caused the change? What question got answered? What reassurance did they receive? Tracking these moments helps you understand uncertainty as a dynamic state, something that shifts and resolves as conversations progress. The fourth practice is one I love, and it's a little more advanced. It's called subtext reading. When you're watching a scene in a movie or TV show where two characters are having a conversation that feels uncomfortable or emotionally complex, try to watch it twice. The first time, just follow the story. The second time, focus on the uncertainty language. Every time a character hedges, note what they're hedging about. What are they not sure of? What are they afraid to say directly? What are they hoping for? The uncertainty language will give you a roadmap of the emotional subtext of the scene. And this is exactly the skill you need to follow real conversations in English. Conversations that often have layers of meaning running underneath the surface. And the fifth practice, maybe the simplest and most powerful of all, is to notice your own uncertainty language. In English and in your first language. When do you hedge? When do you say, I think, instead of, I know? When do you say, maybe, or probably, or I'm not sure? What are those moments telling you about your own uncertainty? Getting comfortable with your own use of this language makes it easier to hear it in others, because you understand what it feels like from the inside. You understand the moment when someone chooses to be honest about their doubt, rather than pretend to certainty they don't have. Let me come back to Oliver one final time. It's the end of the week. The Henderson situation is sorted, the timeline is updated, Nina is happy. Tom sent him a short email that said, "Good handling on Henderson." And Oliver read that and smiled, because he heard the brevity not as dismissiveness, but as efficiency. Tom doesn't use many words when he's satisfied. The fact that he reached out at all was the real signal. Oliver and Priya are having their end-of-week coffee. Oliver says, "You know what I realized this week?" Priya looks at him over her cup. Oliver says, "I think I've been listening wrong. Like, I've been listening for the facts, for the main information. But I've been missing all the in-between stuff. The way people signal what they're not sure about. The way someone can say, 'I wonder if,' and mean, 'I'm pretty sure, but I don't want to make it awkward.'" Priya smiles. She says, "Yeah, that's most of it, actually. The in-between stuff." Oliver shakes his head a little. "Why don't they teach this?" And Priya says, "They kind of do, but not in a way that sticks until you actually need it." And that, "not in a way that sticks until you actually need it," is something I want to hold on to with you for a moment. Because language learning has a funny relationship with necessity. You can study something for years and not really feel it until the moment when you actually need to use it in a real conversation, with real stakes, with real emotions involved. And that's okay. That's how most deep learning works. It doesn't always click in the classroom. Sometimes it clicks in the coffee shop, or the office, or the phone call, or the difficult conversation with someone whose trust you value. What I hope today has done is brought you a little closer to that clicking moment. Maybe it hasn't fully arrived yet. Maybe it has. But either way, you now have more to listen for. You have words and phrases that are no longer invisible to you. The might be, and the I suppose, and the I wonder if, and the seems like, and the I'm not entirely sure. These are no longer just filler. They're signals, and you know how to read them. I want to say something else before we wrap up, and it's something that I genuinely mean. Learning to hear uncertainty in English is also, quietly, a practice in compassion. Because when you really hear someone's uncertainty, when you catch the hesitation in their voice, the careful wording of their concern, the way they leave a door open because they're not ready to close it, you're doing something deeper than just listening to language. You're recognizing their humanity. You're understanding that they, like you, like all of us, are often figuring things out as they go. That certainty is something we perform sometimes, and something we actually feel much less often. The speakers who hedge, who say, I think, and maybe, and I'm not sure, they're showing you who they really are. They're being real with you. And a listener who hears that and responds to it with patience, with follow-up questions, with genuine engagement rather than impatience or frustration. That listener creates a space where people feel safe being honest. And honest conversations are the best kind. The most productive, the most memorable, the most genuinely useful. You are building that skill right now, by being here, by listening, by paying attention. And every time you sit with English audio and actively listen for the signals we talked about today, every single time, you get a little bit better. Your ear gets a little more tuned. The spaces between the words get a little louder. And that's everything. That's the whole lesson. Let me bring it home for you with a clear, simple summary of what we covered today, so you can carry it with you. We talked about how English speakers use language to signal uncertainty, not as a failure of communication, but as honest, calibrated sharing of their real level of confidence. We went through the main uncertainty signals, modal verbs like might, could, may, and would. Phrases like, I think, I believe, it seems like, it feels like, I'm not sure, I suppose, probably, maybe, possibly. Softening words like pretty, quite, kind of, a little, sort of. We talked about the spectrum of certainty, from very low confidence to high but not certain confidence, and how the specific words a speaker chooses tell you exactly where they are on that spectrum. We followed Oliver, Priya, Tom, and Nina through real-feeling situations and identified the uncertainty signals in each one. We talked about hedging as a form of honesty, not weakness, and we gave you 5 practical exercises to take this into your real listening life. This is what I want you to do after you finish listening today. Pick one piece of English audio, just one, and listen to it with uncertainty signals in mind. Notice how often they appear. Notice what they're signaling. Notice how the conversation shifts when uncertainty resolves into clarity. And then come back and do it again tomorrow. And the day after. Because this is how listening skills grow. Not in one big leap, but in small, consistent, deliberate steps. If this lesson helped you, if it gave you something you didn't have before, please share it. Share it with someone in your life who's working on their English, who's trying to understand not just the words, but the world behind the words. This channel, English in Fluency, exists for exactly that. For the learners who want to go deeper, who want to listen like they live in the language, and there's so much more coming. New lessons, new stories, new skills, new ways of tuning in to English that you haven't discovered yet. So subscribe, so you don't miss a single one. And if you want to go back and revisit anything from today, listen again. Listen with different ears the second time. You'll catch things you didn't catch the first time. That's always how it works. This is Alex from English in Fluency. Thank you, really, truly, for spending this time with me today. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, keep listening. Keep noticing. The language is speaking to you all the time. You just have to know how to hear it.